provide just a quick update from Broomfield perspective. As council knows, I shared an email yesterday around the oil and gas front, and I did share that email with Ruth and her team as well, just for some oversight of kind of what we're hearing in that area. And one thing I want to mention, and I'm sure Ruth will talk about this, but the introduction deadline is Monday. And so I know that for many of us, that means and that doesn't mean there won't be bills later. We all know that. But one thing I'll just mention is we're kind of holding our breath, Ruth, on all of these things that are potentially coming, right? That we've been hearing about over the last couple of weeks. And so I'll be curious of the update that you have from being at the Capitol, Dave, live in the Capitol, it looks like. So we really are getting real-time updates. And then if we can just kind of walk through the bills and then kind of talk about, I think we're in a time now where we need to start identifying the bills that we want to make our level 1 priorities, which would be, Broomfield leveraging our positions on, and as well as what are those secondary ones that, again, we're tracking and working with our membership organizations on to be our voice. We've kind of held off on that because it was a little too soon. And again, knowing what we know is coming, we are trying to be thoughtful in that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that from a Broomfield perspective, but just wanted to lay that foundation before we start the conversation. So with that, Ruth, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Danae. And did definitely want to get the chance for my colleague, Dave Denovelis, to say hi. He wasn't able to join us on our last call. So Dave, live and in person from the State House.
Hey, everybody. Dave Denovelis, worked with Ruth, and I'm very excited to meet with you all today and let you know what's going on. It's very glamorous here in the bowels of the House Committee Hall.
I notice he's right by the fire alarm. So if there's any, funny business going on, Dave, we're on you. And of course, joining him with our team is also Cindy Link, and Cindy keeps us all moving in the right direction and organized, and huge thanks to her for everything. So I guess I want to step back a little bit, just remind you all that we are working with your team on the weekly updates. And so hopefully those have been a useful tool. As we said on the last call, we're starting with you all a little bit late in the session, and we understand that we may need to be modifying and kind of adjusting some things. So hope that those are hitting the high points for you. And then for some that want to dig into more detail on a specific issue, is also giving you the tools that you need to read a news article or go look at the bill, etc. So do share feedback with your team and with us if there's some other, if there's changes, but hopefully that's been working pretty well for you all. I guess in terms of the big picture, we are 1/3 of the way through the session. To Danae's point, that we have passed some deadlines for bill introduction. And I think that's what you meant is, the legislature has a series of deadlines, and that includes timing for when legislators can introduce their 5 assigned to them that they get bills. And so we all breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief when that deadline passes, because it means, there's not going to be this slew of bills. Well, I would say that this year is not going to be that way, because everything that we are expecting will be a late bill of the big ticket items. So the land use proposals, the housing things that are still potentially on the horizon, tax policy, oil and gas. Although, I feel like we've had some big oil and gas things already introduced. And again, that's the bit of area that we're less versant in, as I talked about on the last call. So we will need some direction from you. Are you hearing that there's going to be another big bill introduced? Okay, she's nodding her head yes. I'm like, all right, so we will brace for that. We also have several things in motion now. Some have already passed through their whole first chamber and are sitting, in the second chamber. I think maybe 4 or 5 have actually gone on their way to the governor. So we're in this place of the vast majority of the bills have been introduced, but there's still some major ones that impact us that we're waiting on. And there's several that we are interested in that are, midway or sort of almost to the end of the process. having said that, how we structured this last time, and we hope it worked, was to sort of go through your topic areas and talk about it that way. So does that feel, did you want to just speak to oil and gas right away since you brought that up first, or do we want to chat about some of the other items?
Let's go through the items, and then, because I think it will, and then I can maybe summarize at the end how they all connect and kind of where staff's perspective is on what comes next.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, first, and again, we, with your team, created these bucket areas for you, and we're hoping they're based on your priorities that you as the council have established. So we just felt like the best way to manage this volume of issues that we have. So the first area is land use, and everyone is waiting with bated breath on the anticipated legislation or package of bills. We're hearing there'll probably be at least 3 or 4 from the governor's office, the environmental community, and the housing community. I know that several jurisdictions, including our leadership, have reached out to the administration and expressed some concerns about, rumors that they're hearing or concepts that have been floated. I will again share, no one's seen anything official on paper, like here's the bill or here's the bill outline, or none of that has, to my knowledge, been circulated anywhere. But there have been concepts talked about, enhancing owners' rights. We know that our own Representative Lindstedt is planning a bill on growth caps, removing a local's ability to do growth caps. And so there's been concepts out there that we've heard of, and you all, I think, have been involved in those both through your leadership as council, but also through other associations. Until we see something on paper to react to, it's very challenging. And the good news is folks are aware that we will be reviewing these. We have some strong opinions about them. And, I also know we have a breakfast or lunch, actually it's a dinner coming up with 2 of our key members to be able to express just, hey, before you go full bore in supporting these, you need to let us review them and give you feedback and so on. So that's really the top lines from our view on the land use front. Are there other, and again, you all sit at many tables, so if others, we also see this as a place for you to share with us if you're hearing anything that we need to be aware of. I see Commissioner Lynn has her hand up.
I just wanted to mention that CC4CA has a subcommittee on zoning preemption that I'm on, and we almost have our guiding document finished. So we have I think it's about 4-page guiding document, knowing that we haven't seen the bills yet, but anticipating some things. We have principles, specific details and principles that we think should be followed in this legislation. So it's almost finished, and I would think that would be shareable soon.
Oh, that is really good to hear. It's my understanding too that CC4CA was a part of some of the initial conversations and then felt the need to pull back, understanding that, some of the policy concepts being discussed might not work for local governments. So really appreciate their leadership in that. And if and when it's ready, would really like to review so that we're more versant in what the thinking is. Mayor Castriota?
Yes, hi, thanks, Ruth. It's funny about the other rooms because I just finished a meeting with the Metro Mayor's Caucus Executive Committee because we're getting requests from the caucus to come out in opposition of this unseen legislation. But the consensus of the committee was then we take our seat, we're eliminate ourselves from the equation if we just come out full force against something we haven't seen, which a lot of us don't trust that there really isn't anything to see. So that's kind of where we are. We're going to wait and see what they're proposing before we come out in opposition, but we're fully ready to take that stance as the Metro Mayor's Caucus. Whereas some of the other communities, I think it was Cherry Hills Village, Greenwood, they're already talking about suing. So it's hard to go from 0 to 90, without even seeing it yet. So we're standing by.
Yeah, And that's very helpful to know as well. And, again, we haven't worked with you all for long, but I think our counsel would also be hold your powder, wait and see what is on paper. And frankly, we don't want to be cut out of the conversation. We want to be able to provide input, which we know you've been doing through different channels. I mean, that is super helpful. I think it will, before we even see something on paper, those discussions will have shaped what we do see. But it still could be stuff that we have concerns with. So just outright opposing something from the start is never a strategy to stay in the negotiations, in my opinion. But sometimes you have to be strong too. So I can understand where some of those other jurisdictions are coming from. Yes, Jennifer, I don't think we've met. I'm sorry.
I've not met Ruth
I don't think so.
ever.
I have met Ruth.
It's so hard to
Oh,
believe.
when did we meet? I'm so sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
Oh my goodness. Yes, of course we've met numerous times. I have Zoom brain. My apologies.
No worries.
Hello.
I just got all my hair cut off as well, so that might be.
That's
taking as
it.
well.
Okay. And
Yeah, I think both, it goes both ways, right? Folks are so eager to jump onto something without seeing it, and so eager to jump on to oppose it. So it really behooves us, before we jump in and say, yes, this sounds great, to read it, and before we say no, to the mayor's point of what those caveats are, not just to keep our nose under the tent, but to really be able to pick out those pieces that are most applicable to local governments. Yeah, there's just so many times that the title sounds great, but there's a reason that they're seeking late bill status on all of
Yes.
these big bills.
yeah. And, if experience plays out as it does again, they will have done a lot of work to have this greased. And so, that is why it's important that we're having conversations now. I know, for example, CCAT had an extended sort of offline conversation with the Speaker of the House. I know some of you are very close to Majority Leader Moreno, who we understand is going to be, really involved in these conversations. So those are the outreaches that need to happen to be like, hey, before it's greased, we really need to see this. And that you all have been doing this work, it's not as if you're pushing back on the desire to have more affordable housing at all. And in fact, there's some strategies that you've tried that haven't worked, and maybe there's lessons learned there. And there's things that we need that we don't have that could be in the bill and really help us. So I do think they're hearing all those messages. And, perhaps what I would say also is for us to just be ready to react quickly, because if it does come late and they have it greased, and that includes everything from having these pre-conversations, being able to reach out when the bill drops, talking with the press, sort of the whole, we're ready to engage. So that's why that principles document is really helpful too. You can compare what they're saying with what the bill looks like. So I think that's all I have in land use. I don't know if there's any other. Okay, let's then move to income aligned housing. Lots of action in this space, and this isn't even yet the package that we were just talking about. So one of the very highly anticipated and somewhat pretty controversial bills, House Bill 1115, which repeals the prohibition on local residential rent control, passed the House on a vote of 40 aye votes, 20 no, 1 excuse. So, pretty much along partisan lines there. There continues to be discussion about, are more guardrails needed? There continues to be folks who just flat out oppose it. So, but that one is already all the way through the House and on the Senate side. So that is one where, again, if Broomfield chose to take that as a priority, we could work on it, provide testimony in the Senate, lobby it, that kind of thing. And I'm just going to keep going. So I guess stop facts. Folks can stop if you will. I see in the chat, Mayor Castrad asked if CCAT is taking a position. No, they are neutral on this. Yeah, and I know Commissioner Schaaf is on the executive committee if you want to speak to that more, but they CCAT works by a consensus model and they could not reach consensus on that. House Bill 1190 is one that just got through its first committee earlier this week. It is the local government right of first refusal bill. So allowing for one more tool for local governments to step in and provide a fair market value bid on a property to then repurpose for affordable housing. That again made it through its first committee, has a bit of opposition to it from the private sector, who feels that local governments are going to use this to step in and essentially take properties away from them that they might like to secure. Also from homeowners who have some concerns that this is sort of an eminent domain kind of power. It's not that at all. There's a lot of requirements, a lot of parameters on when and how a local government can step in and exert this first right of refusal. It is up possibly tomorrow, actually. They are looking at further amendments to try to provide more parameters and give more comfort to folks that have concerns about it. But this one is definitely moving. It's on CCAT support. CCAT supports it. CML supports it. And I'm not sure where CCI is, to be honest with you. Any questions or comments on that one? Oh yes, Commissioner Schaaf.
Thanks, Ruth. So this is one that I think that, provides Broomfield a great tool in terms of where we're going, the ability to be able to as opposed to just continuing to build attainable income aligned housing, to be able to purchase properties within Broomfield and be able to move those into deed restricted housing. That would be a huge thing for Broomfield. And so, I think that this is one, it helps that we have some advocates out there with CML and CCAT supporting this. But is this one of those that, because there's so much nitty gritty and the details, that we need to be more active in this? Or do you think our partners are going to be able to handle those conversations?
That's a great question. And the discussions are getting pretty wonky. It's to the level of like, how many units should we allow for for a property? How much square footage? And that plays differently in different communities. 20 unit property up in the mountains might be not really worth it in Broomfield. I'm just saying that off the top of my head. So I actually think it might be worth some investment of, if we feel supporting, just so that we can be looking at these amendments and deciding, are they helpful or are they hindering what we're trying to do? Because while we're trying to set parameters, we also don't want to make it so difficult that it doesn't become a useful tool. And as I'm saying, I think that's how you all are going to experience that is different than some of the other jurisdictions at the table.
Definitely. Well, and I asked this question kind of in the same realm that we do with CCAT, where we have, different levels. We have our support, in which we have our level 2 support, which is basically, we know that there's a good amount of support out there. We think that this bill is going to continue towards approval and the governor's signature. And we feel that there's a lot of partners out there that are dealing with us. And then we have those level 1 support, in which we know that we need to be out advocating for our position. And we know that one is maybe not as firm to go to success. And then, of course, we have amend position, which is still a lot of work. We have our oppose, which is obviously a lot of work. And I believe that we have an oppose level 2 and oppose level 1, or maybe it's just all oppose. And then, of course, we have monitor, which is probably very much neutral. So, I think that this is one of those bills that I do believe that this would be a great tool for Broomfield to be able to utilize. And I do believe that there's a lot of nuance in this bill that I think that we need to be updated. So, Manager Hoffman's comment in the chat, I do believe that we need to make sure that we're following the process on any of these bills. But I would love to see it expanded to that kind of level 2 support and that level 1 support, just so that we know how we're using our resources.
And that's super helpful, Devin. So thank you. So I'm going to make a note, and Ruth, I think if we can continue through the bills, I'll make a note if anybody else has bills like that, Devin, where you think you want to bring it to the attention, I'll track them, and then I'll try to summarize it at the end, what I heard, where the bills are that are moving into those higher priorities versus secondary priority. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay.
All right, I will go ahead then and move on. In the transportation space, again, not a lot yet. We do expect that the land use bills are going to have intersection with transit-oriented development and the transit in general. So more on the horizon there, but do know that House Bill 231101, which is the Ozone Sees It Transit Grant Program, passed all the way through the House and is pending in the Senate Transportation Committee, or actually, I'm sorry, it passed in the Senate Transportation Committee earlier this week. So that one is moving forward. This idea, again, that we're going to continue providing a bit of a free period during the ozone season to allow folks to access public transit. So that one is moving. I know Bicycle Colorado has a bill coming around photo radar. So there's some other transportation safety bills that are out there, but I wouldn't say there's any big ticket items in terms of, at this point, reforming transportation policy broadly or funding at this point. Unless others, again, yes, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lynn, you had your hand up.
In CCAT, we talked about, I think it was CCAT, or was it CC4CA? I'm confused now. We talked about that there was a bill trying to roll back some of the transportation fees that were implemented in 260. So, and I know, yes, it was in CCAT, because Devin and I had a little conversation about that. And, I know he worked on that. He felt strongly about not rolling back those fees.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I don't quote me on my bill number. This is a Senate bill sponsored by the President of the Senate and Senator Steve Fenberg, and a Republican. It has bipartisan support, and it is aimed solely at the delivery fees. So it's not, we had several fees going on in Senate Bill 260, and this is solely at the, you have DoorDash, or, you get King Soopers to deliver groceries, and there's a fee through Senate Bill 60 associated with that. The thinking being there, it's offsetting what the others are paying on gas fee if they are driving to the grocery store or the restaurant. That, I think, was a bit of a sleeper provision in the bill that, in all candor, the retail community was not aware of, and that consumers were like, huh? And so there's been quite a bit of public sort of pushback on it. This bill would allow for retailers to absorb it, and it would, give it a little more internal structure without getting into all the wonkiness of that. It would basically restructure how CDOT is managing it. So we can put that on your list to take a closer look at, to have your staff look at. I know also Northwest MCC, so that reminder, they're our client as well. So both Mayor Castrata and Councilman Schaaf are on that committee, that group. They're looking at it, but I can tag it. I just haven't for you all yet. It's Devin.
Yeah, Ruth, I just wanted to add one note. So there was the idea that with the gas fee that was also delayed implementation in the past. One of the things that they did with that was they backfilled those dollars with general funds. And I think that was a suggestion that it came for this enterprise fund as well, is to use general funds to backfill those funds that would be going away with us. And I thought that was an interesting idea. And I think that that's going to be pushed by those various groups as well, CC4CA, CCAT, as well as the Northwest Mayors and Commissioners. So that is an interesting idea to at least put out there.
Yeah.
Backfill those dollars.
Good point, because, again, those dollars are identified towards transit projects that we support. So, to have the funding streams interrupted. If you don't have the fees, then we still want to protect the funding streams. So I can put it on our list and take a little bit closer look at it. How's that sound? And yes, the voice of reason. Yes, general funds are very tight. That is absolutely true. And Dave is our budget expert. He can speak to that a little bit here in a minute. I'm going to just keep going again for sake of time, if that's all right. So House Bill 1070, I'm sorry, that was all I had for you on transportation. Moving into wildfire. So there's two major bills that came out of the interim committee on the Wildfire Matters Review Committee. One deals with setting up a, basically helping for the workforce so that we can have both fire prevention activities going on as well as response and recovery. You know, what we found out in all of this is that just like the rest of the world, there's a workforce challenge, but definitely in this fighter space. And so that bill is making its way through the process and is, you know, in pretty good shape because it was blessed by the interim committee and is, and I'm sorry, I'm going to make sure I've got my bill number for you here. I'm not sure that you guys have it on your matrix. You should. I'm gonna make a note of myself. I need to get you the bill number, but this is moving through that process and will provide about $3 million extra for community colleges or other institutions of higher education to create these tracks for to essentially create the workforce for our firefighting. A companion bill to that is Senate Bill 166, which is establishing a wildfire resiliency code board. And again, thanks to your leadership on your council for helping to shape that bill. It will essentially set up a wildfire board that then sets code, minimum level of code of which the local jurisdiction has to meet or exceed. So it doesn't put the code in statute, but it authorizes this board to, one, create what is the wildlife urban interface, and then secondly, establish the code. That's one that is actively supported by CCAT, CC4CA, Healthier Air and Water Colorado. CCI is neutral, and CML, I believe, is amend. So there's one other that I did want to bring to your attention in the wildfire space, and that is House Bill 1174. This one is coming from, deals with property insurance and underinsurance. It is sponsored by Representative Amabile from Boulder, and it is direct reaction to the Marshall Fire. Essentially what the Division of Insurance is doing is coming in and saying, we want to support transparency in what people are purchasing with their insurance products, and make sure that the companies offering the insurance are robust and able to meet the demand if it's there. There's a second bill that we expect that's dealing with setting up a whole state wildfire fund of last resort, insurance fund of last resort. That hasn't been introduced yet, but this first one I would ask us to take a look at and perhaps support. CML supports it, CCAT supports it. I'm not sure again about CCI. I better study up on my CCI positions. I apologize. But those are some of the big ticket items right now in the wildfire space. Anything people have to add on that? No. Okay. Moving then to oil and gas. So Danae, maybe I can turn it over to you just because again, we're following the biochar and the big greenhouse gas emission bill, but
Sure, and maybe I'll kind of connect them because I am kind of putting ozone and oil and gas, I'll say for me in a bucket, because all of these bills that the one that's been introduced, so the one you mentioned, Ruth, the Senate Bill 16, I think is the greenhouse gas emissions reductions bill. And there are some sections in there. I know we've talked about it with our council around, injection wells, and I'm looking at Pat and Nancy as well, and concerns about local control and what that means for us. And the second piece is I mentioned it, I think, a few weeks ago, and as I said earlier, I sent an email to council. We received a legislative proposal from the COGCC that was done at the direction of Governor Polis to look at the regulatory framework of COGCC and expanding that to include carbon sequestration and capture, so CCUS storage, and some other emerging technologies. The rumblings have been all over the place and a lot of inconsistencies of what it's actually going to look like when we see it introduced. From the last call that we had with Chair Robbins from the COGCC, it seems like it is going to be introduced at some point during this legislative session. I've heard mumblings that could be as soon as tomorrow, but I've also seen some of the papers and know it's very nebulous right now. I haven't seen anything where it's really put into like a draft bill proposal. The most recent that's come out, and council all has this in the email from me yesterday for reference, as well as Ruth and Dave and Cindy, is some companion bills is kind of the approach they're taking now to go with Senate Bill 16. So kind of that they would go together and address some of the other issues. And there were some concepts again on paper that were shared, but I haven't seen any draft legislation. So that's the big front. And again, I think those are a big area, which I would recommend when we talk at the end, where we leverage maybe Broomfield's voice is in that umbrella of ozone / COGCC bills. And then the other one, not as concerned, but it has not been introduced, but I think it will be either tomorrow or Monday, is the force pool legislation that we've talked about. As you know, outside counsel Mike Foote has, I think, is one of the big people behind helping it. I know Councilmember Lim, you had shared you'd been asked to testify or provide comments as a resident. And so again, that bill hasn't been introduced. I shared yesterday with all of you as well some updated language that we've received. It's changed a little bit, as we know everything does as it moves through the process. And I think that's a big update on that front, but I'm looking at you, Pat. Do you have anything else to add on either of those? Okay, perfect. I think that's it. And then Ruth, I'll come back to those again as we identify maybe those tier 1, tier 2 priorities.
Okay, that sounds great. And yes, those are going to be some big things in addition to Senate Bill 16 and the 1069, which is the biochar bill. All right, moving on, property tax policy. So this is another one of those, isn't there going to be anything this session? I believe we shared two communications that went out to the governor's staff, Kerry Kennedy, his fiscal guru, and then the legislative leadership from the local government and the realtors, so Special Districts Association, CEA, the education community, basically saying, hey, if you start to think about doing something with respect to property tax, you really need to include these stakeholders because we are dependent on property taxes and it will have devastating consequences if you do something and don't think about how it impacts us. So that communication went out. In response, Kerry Kennedy met with the group last Friday and, didn't say if there's anything to be expected this session, but conveyed that the administration remains extremely concerned that Colorado is quite vulnerable to the citizen initiative around property cuts and property tax cuts and, akin to Proposition 13 in California. And that those kinds of efforts have been thwarted by the administration and the legislature kind of heading them off at the pass with an agreement that there will be some kind of a grand bargain on this for Colorado. And so, it's basically the message, my takeaway was to the local governments, like, yes, you are right to be concerned. We also have this bigger threat out there that we must anticipate and manage and respond to. So there's going to be another meeting later in I think next week, not tomorrow, but the following Friday. So what is that, the 10th? And I think all of the groups are just saying, we can't have you introducing something in the last 3 days of session that we haven't seen and don't know about and really impacts us. And I do believe that certainly, Miss Kerry Kennedy heard that and took that message back, you know, it remains to be seen what, if anything, has yet formed around these ideas. So is there any, are you all hearing anything else through your channels on the property tax front? No. Okay, so we'll just keep you updated on that. Is the place where local government's voicing our concerns at this juncture. So we'll just keep you posted on those conversations. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Dave to talk about actually a category we're calling public safety. So that would include gun violence prevention, and we know you're interested in some motor theft prevention kinds of things. So, oh no, did we lose? Oh, there you are, Dave. You're right in the middle of my screen. Dave.
All right. Thanks, Ruth. Thanks, everyone. Just a quick overview. Last week, Senate and House Democrats released 4 bills aimed at gun violence prevention. One House Bill 1219, which would introduce a 3-day waiting period for purchase of a firearm. In the Senate, there's Senate Bill 168 that would allow folks to sue firearm manufacturers. Previously, that's been not an avenue available. Senate Bill 169, that increases the minimum age to purchase a firearm from 18 to 21. And then Senate Bill 170, which makes changes to the extreme risk protection orders by expanding who can file ERPOs. They were introduced, they have not been calendared yet, so they haven't had their first committee hearing. I would expect that to happen, probably in the next week or so. And I probably expect it to happen all in one day or very close to it, to kind of manage the kind of, attention that'll draw to the Capitol for when those come out. And right now they're all sponsored and backed by House and Senate Democrats. We've heard some rumblings that perhaps, maybe waiting period or something might garner a support from a Republican or two, but expect these to be incredibly partisan all the way through, just as this the gun and firearms issues are. So that's the update there. Any questions?
I think, Dave, let me just mention, I know I shared with you, but for the council members on the call, Noah Ponte-Busan has seen the letter that you all submitted about City Council's proactive approach to addressing this locally, and then encouraging on the age. So the 2 specifically that we've been monitoring and are concerned with are the age restriction and the waiting period, in alignment with the letter you sent to leadership.
Gotcha. And we will, Ruth and I will keep you up to date as we get plenty more info on committee hearings, discussions, any potential changes to those 2 in particular, and any of the other ones as well. So.
Yeah, and if you all decide you want to be more engaged, and there is a coalition that's formed around these bills, they are looking at them as a package, but certainly I don't know that they would be adverse to, if there's just a few that we want to weigh in on, thinking about it that way. So, and then the House Bill 1219, Senate Bill 97, which deals with motor theft. So that one did make it through its first committee in Senate Judiciary. It's now pending in appropriations. Oh, I'm sorry, Devin, did you have a question on the gun violence bills? I didn't mean to roll over you there.
No, that's all right. I realized that you weren't done with this whole category. So if you want to finish this category, I can follow up.
Okay. Yeah, just was saying that, again, we know that motor vehicle theft and catalytic converter theft is a huge issue for all the state. This is aimed at deterring that. There's some controversy, however, around, the balance that this bill is striking. It's basically saying that if you are caught in the act stealing a vehicle, then, I don't want to say you're off the hook, but the penalties are less. If it's 24 hours later, then it's a felony. Let me correct that. It's a felony if you do it twice. So there's been some question of is this bill robust enough to really have that deterrent effect that is intended? So again, I don't know if you guys have looked at it closely, but if you want to, just know that it's already through its first committee. It's on the bill tracker, and can review what version it came out of from its first committee. I'm gonna really speed us up here, sorry. Actually, I think that might be the end of our big ticket items. Oh, Dave, you had something to add, please. Go
Oh, and
ahead.
I just wanted to add, it was not amended, so it's still the same form that we have for Senate Bill 97. And I did overhear a conversation between a couple members. It does appear there are some budget items outstanding in public safety regarding helping lower or kind of rein in the motor vehicle theft in Colorado. I heard that there might be some like companion legislation around that would grant out money to cities, counties, law enforcement to help with motor vehicle theft enforcement. So we'll put a pin on that and let you know what more comes of it.
Well, thanks, Dave, for keeping me honest. It was not amended, so that's helpful. No amendments to look at, but that we're expecting potentially a companion bill around a funding component. Okay, Commissioner Schaaf.
Thanks, Ruth. So back to the gun legislation. So one of the pieces that we talked about in Broomfield was training and education requirements. We have a Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which is not necessarily doing what they were called to do, in terms of providing grants and providing research, things like that. I'm wondering if there's the ability to do an amendment on one of these bills to call for a task force to be created to work with the Office of Gun Violence Prevention to look at education and training requirements and grant programs to activate that space in greater detail. And I'm wondering if that's the best avenue to go down is with a possible amendment to set up that task force. Is the task force the appropriate mechanism so that we can have kind of a longer period of time in which the legislature could have that conversation?
And Commissioner Schaaf, happy to jump in just to provide some context on what you just said there. The extreme risk protection order does specifically require Office of Gun Violence Prevention to do public education campaigns around HERPOs and all that. So I think if that is something that you all would like to pursue, I think that is there's an existing vehicle, and we can always reach out to folks and see if that's something that we can expand. Because I don't believe you're the only person that's brought up that the Office of Gun Violence Prevention hasn't lived up to what it was touted when it was passed, and the bill was passed in 2020.
And I think it's even beyond kind of those public educational announcements, things. I think this is much more kind of providing grant opportunities to nonprofits to conduct free or reduced gun safety classes. It is the idea that I think that one of the conversations that we had was a first-time gun purchaser, that they have the mandate to have a class and a certification. So kind of looking at those mechanisms. So it would be definitely further than just a public awareness campaign.
Dave, was there anything else you were going to say on that? Sorry.
No, I mean, I hear you, Commissioner Schaaf, and I think there are those, talk with the coalitions on that, just to, see if there's ways that we can leverage the existing bills and to make the Office of Gun Violence Prevention do what everybody thought it was going to do.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that, we have the ability, we have a strong representative, with William that was a part of those conversations that, I think that in terms of maybe possible late bill status, that this could be one of those, an amendment piece. So just trying to get, a feel for you, whether this is one of those that could be an amendment, or if this is one of those that, to create something like this. It's kind of like that fire, the WUI code amendment that was created last season. I don't want that to happen, right? I don't want to put amendment forward that doesn't go anywhere or ends up getting taken out of a bill. So what is kind of the best path to kind of have that to get that moving along, whether it's an amendment, and if it's a task force, to signal a task force creation, if this should be a separate bill, and how we go about doing that.
I'll just jump in, and anybody has any other ideas. I think the first step would be to talk to the Gun Violence Prevention Coalition and perhaps some of the sponsors of these bills. I know that they might be sympathetic, and if they feel that there's a way that we can, further move forward on gun violence prevention. So I think that would be the first step, and I think Ruth and I are happy to reach out to our colleagues to see what the appetite is and if what vehicle people think is the best too. So.
All right, well, that's a high level. I want to turn it back to, have any priority discussions or where you'd like to take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. So I'm gonna jump in, and I tried to just take notes and capture, and Mayor, I saw your comment in the chat. So I think I have at least what people have said, and kind of as we've been watching, the good news is what I've heard from Ruth and her and the Ponte Bussam team, and then what we've been discussing with the internal legislative team, and now what you are all sharing is that we're in a lot of alignment, which is good, of where we need to start separating, leveraging our priority bills versus our, and one thing I want to say is they're all important. And this is where I think the legislative session always gets messy, of really but we have to decide where we want to use our, hold our power, and where we want to have our voice be the strongest heard. Because if we speak up on every bill, we slowly become a voice that's not heard or lost in the noise. So I think a way for us to break it down, and I know Devin, you had provided this feedback, and Ruth and Dave and Cindy and I had talked about this at the beginning, of using that model that you guys have seen through CCAT and through some of your other membership organizations, of identifying priority 1 and priority 2. And Devin, you kind of gave a good summary of that earlier in the meeting. So if you look at the matrix now, which I did put in the chat, you'll see it's far too big of us to make impacts on all of it. And so right now we've really been using it as a tracking to start honing in on where we need to focus, looking back at council priorities, looking at the adopted principle statements for this year. And again, where do we need to leverage our voice? So I think kind of what I'm hearing is, I think the 3 big categories, because if we get into more than 4 or 5 bills, it's really hard for us to, and it's not capacity necessarily with staff, but again, the collective voice that we want to share down at the Capitol. So the 3 areas I'm still consistently hearing week over week is housing. And the 2 bills that are kind of flagged from my radar is the first one, Devin, you mentioned, which is 1190, the right of first refusal. And then one we did not discuss today that, I'll be honest, I think from a staff perspective, we've been a little concerned on, is the 1192, which is the construction deficit bill. And I'm looking at Jeff, because I think we'll want to dive into that one more. To be honest, that one is, I think, more concerning. But those are the 2 bills based off of, again, today, of what's been introduced and what we're hearing is coming. Those are the ones I would put into that construction defects. Sorry. Thank you, Jen. Into that category for level 1. The second category, I hear the theme we keep talking about, is the land use zoning preemption. And again, as Ruth mentioned, concept only. So I would recommend holding that space for that bill to be introduced so that we can review it, dive into it, and be prepared. And Jean, as you mentioned, the work that CC4CA is doing in that policy document will also help us once we see what that language actually looks like. And I think, Mayor, you also mentioned MMC is tracking and ready to take a position as soon as we see something.
We also decided to write a letter in opposition to HB 1192.
Oh, MMC did?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you.
The executive committee.
Okay, so then that would be the second category, what I'm hearing thematically week over week. And then the third one is that ozone category that I was talking about. And to me, that includes the Senate Bill 16 greenhouse gas reduction bill. And then this, we don't know what it's going to be, but whatever is coming in hopefully the next couple of days of session around the biochar the 1069 and how those are all going to come together, because that's what the white paper is showing now is they really need to be companion bills. So to me, what I heard, those are the three categories I keep consistently hearing from council and where we could focus in a tier 1. But then also there were more about tier 2. Yes, Mayor or Jen, that's right where I'm going next. So under public safety, Mayor mentioned Senate Bill 97 and Broomfield taking an active position on it. That's the motor vehicle theft and unauthorized use. So what I'd like to do is first let me pause and say, hearing those categories for level 1, any concerns with that? And then let me go into the messy ones, which are not clear to me where you would want those to fall. Okay, so let's talk about, so level 2 or not, but the messy ones where I don't know. So the first one is Senate Bill 166, the establishment of Wildfire Resiliency Code Board. I hear all the work. It seems like our membership organizations are really leveraging there. And that's why I would recommend putting it under level 2. But are there any concerns with that? I see a lot of up and down head shakes. Great. Okay. The next one was that gas transportation fee conversation. So monitoring that in case we do need to look into it more, recommendation putting that on level 2. As Ruth said, other membership organizations are on it, tracking and monitoring. Okay, the third one was the firearm bills that Dave provided a summary on. So one I mentioned, we've already leveraged where we could again on the age and the hold period, but I heard Devin, there's potentially a desire to take that one step further in discussing it with the coalition, as Dave mentioned, and talking to bill sponsors of the current bills and seeing if we could maybe get more education and training expectations put in, or if we need to have a separate bill. So that one, let's start with that one. Is thoughts from the team or from council on, do we put that over a level 2, or do we want to move that into a level 1 and engage with Aponte Busam to look into that more?
I'm gonna go ahead and speak. I would love to have, we researched this for 6 months, and I feel like we have punted this off to the state again until May. And if we don't investigate it, it looks like we did all of this work for nothing. So I do want to investigate this. This is very important to a lot of our gun owners here in Broomfield to look into that.
Let me word this different, and I learned this from Nancy. Are there any objections with staff looking into this more? And if there, and then we can report back, you know, what Dave learns from his conversations and recommendations on next steps. Look at Nancy, I do learn every once in a while. So there we go. Staff will look into that. So Dave and Ruth, I'll be in touch about that. And
I actually learned that from Ruth in CCAT,
Oh.
just so you know. It really helps to share a meeting.
the circle of life here, it all just keeps coming back, right? So Chief and Christina, I know you guys have done work on that, as well as the Chief of Police Association. And Christina, I think when we connected yesterday, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the Chief of Police have taken a position of support on that. Is that the right one? Nope, I'm missing them up. Never mind, ignore that. I'm sorry. That's for the motor vehicle. Too many things. Okay, so back to firearm. I will work with Dave and Ruth to look at what the path forward could be and come back to council with a recommended next steps. Great. The next one, so that's number 3 for level 2. The number 4 one, Mayor Castriota put in the chat, which was Senate Bill 97, motor vehicle theft and unauthorized use. And this is where I just muddied it up a little bit. So to clarify, this is the one I discussed with Christina Pena-Helm, who I see on the camera, with Chief Hempelman. And Christina, it is my understanding that the Chiefs Association did take a position of support on this bill as well, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so my question to council would be, is that, I guess, Mayor, were you asking to keep it as a level 2 and we can put it as a position of support, or were you wanting to leverage even more and move it into level 1, knowing that we already have 4 to 5 bills on that list?
Well, I don't want to take up bandwidth. What does our lobby team feel about its prognosis? I know it's got a lot of support behind it. Ruth or Dave?
I apologize. I was reading the chat.
That's
I still have a
okay.
hard time doing both about the gun ordinances. What, can you repeat the question?
On,
My
on
apologies.
SB 97, does it need more
Oh.
support or do you feel like it's pretty well supported with all of the other agencies that are behind
Um,
it?
I mean, Dave, you may be a little closer, but I would say low level support would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, it's got bipartisan support and sponsorship. It passed out of Judiciary, which is a wild committee as it is, unanimously. I think that the issue itself isn't a controversial one. It's all more devil in the details, but I think low level, put your name on it because it is something, and that might also help when it comes to like any additional resources that might be coming through other vehicles. That's another one too. It's like low level on the bill that's going through, but then also some support for any JVC recommendations that provide funding to local law enforcement agencies to help curb this problem. So I think, and Jennifer was right, did listen in. You were great on that testimony. So
Well, it was a group effort. Our fearless leader helped craft that testimony for me. Thanks, Jen, on their phone. And a lot of the people that had problems with it on the judiciary were still like, I can live with it. I heard that. So they got to a place where, they couldn't deny the overwhelming support. There was only like one person that was against or maybe two, and all the people that testified. So good. Let's keep it where it is then with the level 2 support. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank
If
you.
y'all are good with that. I mean, I'm not here to just wave my wand, but I think it's a step in the right direction for what we're trying to do to protect our residents.
So then-
Go ahead.
sorry.
Yes.
No, so I'm just trying to be mindful also. So Ruth, we get you what you need, and I will summarize this, and Cindy, we can work on updating the matrix for these ones. Again, so just to clarify, level 1, we're kind of focusing on 3 areas: housing, land use, ozone/COGCC, carbon sequestration, and biochar. Again, knowing that those are all considered companion bills right now. Land use, we are on hold for what comes, but we're creating that space to be ready to move quickly and work with Ruth and Dave as needed. And then the third being housing. And right now we have 2 bills that we're monitoring. One is 1190, right of first refusal. And then the other one was that 1192 bill that I mentioned, which was the construction defects. So that's where I have right now level 1 kind of shaping up, a little squishy still because we don't have a lot of the bills there. And then level 2, I have 4 listed. So again, Senate Bill 166, the establishment of Wildfire Resiliency Code Board. 2, the gas transportation fee. 3, the continuing to look into the firearm gun control coalition and looking into training and education, which staff is going to go back and work with Dave and Ruth and come up with a recommendation to share with council. And number 4 being Senate Bill 97, motor vehicle theft and unauthorized use. Anything? Oh, go ahead, Ruth.
Yeah, no, thank you for that super helpful summary and for, planning to write it up. We will also then change our reporting with the Secretary of State. So we will be reported as, for example, supporting Senate Bill 97 for Broomfield. Just want you to be aware of that. It'll be, publicly noted. I was just going to say on this one that I would just encourage you to think about is HB 1174, which again is that underinsurance bill. Just knowing that your community had such an impact with the Marshall Fire. There's a fact sheet on that. It's a bit of a contentious bill, and with respect of the insurance industry is pushing back. And so more voices around the need for adequate insurance may be helpful. But I can send the information and have it be a consideration. If you guys are open to that.
Yeah, that one doesn't look like it's in our bill matrix. So
Exactly.
I
I
would
was like,
appreciate
oh.
that information.
Yeah. Okay. I'll send the fact sheet and, okay. That sounds great. Thank you.
Ruth,
Can I add one thing
Very
today?
helpful to us.
Sure, go ahead, Devin, and then Lori, I see your question, so I do want to unpack that after Devin goes as well.
Oh, it kind of ties into that. So it looks like that's the only mental health bill that we have on our matrix is the one that Lori brought forward. Is that correct?
Yeah, we really didn't, I mean, we are very involved in all behavioral health bills for other clients. And so, but just did not understand if it was a priority, or if so, like what kind of lens you're looking at it from. There's numerous behavioral health bills in a good way. I mean, it's great that it's getting so much needed attention and focus. And
So,
Dave, is there anything you want to, I know you're knee deep in it too.
So my ask on that, Lori, I'll be honest, those are ones that with all of these other bills, we had the one, but there's so many mental health bills. So if you could just give me a little bit of time to look through what has all been introduced, and I'll work with Cindy to get the matrix updated. But I did also want to ask Lori, is there a specific, when you say, is there a specific bill additionally that we don't already have on there that you're referencing? Or I just want to make sure we get to your ask.
There is a specific bill on the mental health assessments. I am not remembering it off the top of my head. It's an earlier
1003.
House bill. What's that?
Yeah, 1003.
1003.
1003. Thank you. I was like, it's a very early House bill. Representative Daphne Michelson-Janae, 1003. And we can get you background on that. There's a there's a coalition around it. There's fact sheet.
Yeah, as Manager Hoffman mentioned, our statewide association, the Colorado Association of Local Public Health Officials, are monitoring this bill. We're not in a place of active support because the fiscal note is so large. There's a question from our lobbyist if there's feasibility of this actually passing. So they're going back and getting additional information for us to determine whether or not we need to change our position.
Well, how about we certainly can add it to the matrix and then get additional background, on where it stands and what the thinking is around the challenges of getting it funded.
Thank you, Ruth. And Jason, thanks for that additional. It's all of these things are getting tracked just all over the place. So it's always helpful to come together, and with you being the subject matter expertise on that, I know you've leaned in a lot. So thank you for sharing that and for sharing it with us today. And I do want to be mindful. I know people have other meetings to jump onto. Are there any other additions or comments that you all wanted to share as we come to the end of our time for today?
See, Lori Anderson, and I see two hands up still. Sorry.
So I'll just note, we also have just received a letter to sign on to that delayed introduction of the ozone bill. And that's something that we internally need to discuss. I sent out an email on that, and I think we can, unless staff has something they want to add, we can just see if we have enough support to help to bring that forward. I think it just needs a little bit of support. We've already gotten a few responses back, but I'll let, I'm not sure the best way to do it. I just want to flag that, and then we can solve that after this meeting. That's it.
Well, Lori, I just have to tell you, you move so fast, because I got the email, I called Jen and said, hey, and then all of a sudden, and I'll be honest, it helped me because I didn't have to. So I haven't reviewed the letter in full in transparency, because I got it the same time you did first thing this morning. So I will take a look at that after this call as well. And Devin, I see your hand now.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So are we moving 1003 to a level 2 support on that?
That's where I have it noted, but to monitor and look into the fiscal note before we decide if any formal position would be taken in alignment with what Jason's update was from his organizations.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And Jason, is that CALFO or the Public Health Association? CALFO?
CALFO, yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
amazing
Jennifer
lobbyist.
Miles.
Jen Miles, she's amazing. She and I work very closely together on many issues.
Yeah, Ruth. She is good.
So I think this call is indicative to a lot of the conversations that happen down at the state, and I'm sure Ruth and David will provide from a JBC perspective of once they tabulate all of these asks. So to think that the general fund is going to do backfill, and then with the fiscal notes, that's a priority for the whole state, which is mental health. Something's got to give, right? It's much like our bit, our it's not really reprioritizing, it's reallocating. So finite pot, what comes off in order for these new items to then be addressed. So what seems like a really great idea to do the backfill with general fund dollars, are those general fund dollars wiser spent on tax retail or mental health? Right. And the answer is it depends on who you ask. So it's once the long bill gets going, it's going to be a fascinating process and give all of us a really good indication about how they're going to square up all of these asks and gives, quite frankly.
Yeah, true. So we have another meeting before that, I think in 3 weeks. And so that will be actually sort of in the final stretch of the Joint Budget Committee doing figure setting and preparing the budget for introduction to the rest of their body, the other, 90, Ruth, what's 100 minus 6? 94 members. So it will be a journey for sure. And there's limited revenue this year. We have a lot of tax revenue, but we're also returning a lot. So there's no more one-time ARPA dollars. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but we can report on that when we next meet as well. This has been so helpful to us to get some direction for you all. Again, we'll dig in and really look forward to, I think we'll also see you at a legislator luncheon here or dinner in the near future. And with that as somewhat of an afterthought, that's also helpful. Our folks want to know what we think is a priority. And so to see our list of bills is super important to them. They've already said, hey, what are you guys working on? So, to have it in writing is really helpful and to be able to talk about them directly. Awesome. All right. Well, you know where to find us underneath the dome, and we'll keep sending the weekly updates. Holler if there's some, additional information that's needed, and we'll just keep plugging. Really appreciate it.
We do too.
Right.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
guys so much.